Rajan pretty much got it right, didn't he? We're all broke, no one's having babies, there's way too much migration, public services are shot. I mean, what is there to celebrate?
Well, I can't disagree with what you're saying, Alex, but I think the Today programme is supposed to be a rigidly impartial BBC flagship programme, and it even has fact checkers, allegedly, to make sure that it remains that way. So I think that there was a partisan sort of sound about Amal Rajan's questioning. But on the other hand, I don't think that Jeremy Hunt had much in the way of answers about the way that we've landed up after 14 years of Tory rule.
Yeah, I mean, he is trying to polish the proverbial, isn't he, here? That was hardly the most dramatic, sensational, generous budget in history. In fact, we swiftly learned afterwards that, in fact, subsequent to his budget, we are heading for the highest tax burden since 1948, something over 30%, I think it is. Therefore, he can hardly claim that he has laid the groundwork for a brighter, more prosperous future for Britain. Almost quite the reverse by the look of it, Trevor.
Well, I think the problem is that they don't have any money. A few months ago, they were talking about things like scrapping inheritance tax, which would have been expensive. They were talking about getting rid of stamp duty on houses, which would have been a really good move to do. They were even talking about spending some money on defence, which I think is the biggest gap in this budget, because we're going to come to really regret the fact our armed forces are not up to snuff when it comes to any serious military threat. But the fact is that we have spent £400 billion trying to get over the pandemic and the totally calamitous lockdown that followed. So he has been left strapped for cash. But nonetheless, they've been in power for 14 years. They shouldn't have been in the position they were in before COVID. And we should have money left. We should have the ability, if we'd done the job properly, I'm talking about the government, not me or us, if the job had been done properly over the last 14 years, we would have money in the bank to deal with the problems of today.
Yeah, I think your assessment, Trevor, is bang on there, because I'm sick to death now of being gaslit by the Conservative Party, who say, oh, well, it was all down to COVID. Well, no, COVID itself didn't wreck the economy. It was government policy that did that. I'm fed up with them saying, oh, well, it's because Russia invaded Ukraine. That's because we haven't had a sensible energy policy to be self-sufficient in decades now. I'm fed up with them saying, oh, well, you know, oh, all these migrants, we can't do anything about it. Of course you can. You're the ones who come up with the laws to control the borders. And I'm also fed up with them gloating about halving inflation when, frankly, I can't see that it's anything they've done to bring us here. Is there anything they have done that we can celebrate?
Alex, I think if you stand for Prime Minister, I'd vote for you.
I would too.
Good luck.
If only to get rid of her.
I mean, look, everything you say is true. The biggest thing, the biggest millstone around the neck of the Conservative Party after 5 prime ministers in 8 years is that they've done nothing to shift the dial when it comes to prosperity. People feel poorer than they were when they took power, and they will continue to feel poorer because they are actually poorer than when they took power. The disposable incomes of the ordinary working people of this country have not risen significantly, if at all, since the slump of 2008, shortly before the Tories took over, in order to put things right after that particular crash.
I'll tell you what annoys me about Hunt and Sunak and people like Cameron is they go, oh, people won't vote for us. Why won't they vote for us? And the answer is, guys, you're not Conservatives. Conservative voters don't know who to vote for. Look at that budget yesterday. Coming on the back of 14 tax rises. We've got the highest tax burden, as I just said, almost since 1948. And they keep putting our taxes up. They didn't even cut income tax yesterday. They just messed around with national insurance, which Jeremy Hunt said was particularly unfair, but stuck with it. Also in this budget, there's it's the death of aspiration. So you want to buy a second home by the seaside or something. The Tories are going to tax you up to the hilt. They're going to make it impossible or difficult for you to do so. The nom-dom tax, I get that. They're trying to nick a policy to annoy Labour, but it's not Conservative. Why don't these people understand they're supposed to represent the Conservative Party, and that's who Conservative voters want to vote for, but they do not offer that option?
No, and I think that that's been the case since David Cameron took over as Prime Minister in 2010. In that particular government, they systematically and deliberately dismantled all the Thatcherite signposts. They didn't want anything to do with Thatcher. The word Thatcher was just bad news as far as they're concerned. It was a bad smell and they wanted to get rid of it. So instead, they followed the master, Tony Blair. And that's the price we're paying today for the mistakes that were made in the first 5 years of the Liberal Democrat Tory coalition, when basically they abandoned all the Conservative policies that you're now describing.
One thing that really irritated me yesterday, I asked Norman Lamont about the impact of migration on the economy, and he basically said, oh, it's not the time for that. Oh, that's nothing to do with the Chancellor. They've got no answer to this. But what I think's going on here is a massive, massive, disgusting cover-up. What I've learned is the Department for Work and Pensions is no longer going to publish data on who gets welfare benefits, whether they're foreign-born or British-born. We then find out HMRC are not going to give us similar information on who's paying tax. Every single step of the way, they're covering up the impact of migration on our economy, having sold us the lie that it was good for us and it increases GDP. Turns out the Netherlands and Germany have done the opposite. They've done a big investigation into what their level of inward migration has caused the economy, and it turns out 17 billion euros to the Netherlands, 20 billion euros to Germany in just 1 year. That, to me, is the biggest reason why we're in an economic mess. Why on earth can they not control our borders? Why?
They can, if they wanted to. They don't want to. And honestly, this goes back further than even David Cameron. Gordon Brown and Tony Blair opened the floodgates to uncontrolled mass immigration in order to bring in cheap labour at the cost of the workers of Britain. The ordinary workers of Britain suddenly found themselves competing, admittedly, with very highly skilled immigrants in the early days from Eastern Europe. But those have all gone home, and now we have enormous numbers of people who aren't very highly skilled at all, coming in to do the menial jobs at the lowest possible wage that can be paid legally. And it isn't. We've known this for many, many years. Economists have been pointing out that immigration doesn't raise productivity per capita. It simply raises the work done by the larger numbers of people in the country. That doesn't mean prosperity. That means the reverse of prosperity. It means bigger welfare bills, fewer tax receipts per capita. And so this is a problem that's been abundantly evident literally from day one when immigration was let loose.
Just a quick word before you go, Trevor. Good to have you on board as always. No increase on defence spending, no breaks for pensioners. Again, hardly Conservative policies, and they're turning their back on their guaranteed supporters, pensioners. Why didn't they help them? Why didn't they, in this very, very tense global situation, increase spending on defence?
Well, just going on to pensioners just for a moment, as one of that particular group, I think that the pensioners have done pretty well as, from the triple lock. They got 10% plus last year. They're going to get 8% this year. And I think that actually the triple lock is completely unaffordable and should be scrapped. As for defence, I think that this will come back to haunt the Tories. The Tories are supposed to be the party which puts defence number one, as its duty as a government should be. The defence of the nation is the number one priority. And we may well find ourselves, not just in the coming years, but in the coming months even, possibly under threat from Russia or from a spillover elsewhere in the Middle East. I mean, the Middle East is only just beginning. And I think that we will regret bitterly that we haven't upgraded and improved our armed forces.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Fantastic to talk to you as always. Thank you so much.
Well, GP and commentator Dr. Rennie Hunderkamp is still with us. Now, Rennie, I want to ask you specifically, a lot of announcements related to the NHS yesterday. First of all, there was this $3 billion odd for productivity and digitisation. I think that's something to be celebrated, although it's interesting that Rishi Sunak's wife's company, Infosys, has got a number of contracts out of that.
By the way, let's not forget the last time the NHS updated its computer system, it wasted 12 billion quid. It was a disaster, as Rennie
But then also sticking with what we were talking to Trevor about there, we've been told for ages that immigration is vital for staffing the NHS, and we've never been allowed to say, actually, the number of migrants now coming into the country who aren't necessarily contributing to the economy, tourism, health tourism, all of this is not actually helping the NHS. It is massively impacting it. I want to know what your view is on that as a GP.
Look, at the moment, there is no doubt that a vast proportion of NHS staff are from abroad. They're migrants. But that's because we've had no long-term plan on the NHS for as long as you can possibly remember. It takes at least 7 years to train a doctor, 3 years to train a nurse. We needed to increase the numbers, plan for it, and we should have staffed our own hospitals with our own people. People want to be nurses and doctors. Medical school is oversubscribed 13 times. We've no shortage of clever young people who want to be doctors. We've no shortage of nurses until we took their bursary away. So we should have actually been planning to staff our own hospitals. It is ridiculous and actually morally obscene that we are taking the brightest and the best from countries that can ill afford to lose them because we haven't trained up our own people.
Do you think that now that they're getting this money from generous Jeremy, that the NHS might finally get rid of its fax machines and sort of update their technology a little bit? I mean, the NHS is the last organisation probably in the world
79,000. They've got 79,000.
79,000 fax machines. What the hell is going on there?
Fax machines since 1991.
So they were banned. They were banned. They weren't supposed to be in an NH hospital, I think, from about 2018. They've still got 79,000. But the thing is, I don't welcome this £3.5 billion into tech at all. I would welcome doctors not having to fill out all of the paperwork that they do that has slowly been increased to just tick boxes and justify all of these back office managers on vast salaries to collating the information. Because if you collect information, you've got to collate it. But don't forget that Jeremy Hunt sat in front of a select committee and said, yes, when I became Health Secretary in 2017, I did promise to make it paperless. I'm glad people don't remember that I made that promise.
Is that really? He might have
the audacity of it.
Did he also promise to get rid of the fax machines? Because he didn't keep that either, did he? 79,000. What do they do? Send it to each other? No one else has got a fax machine.
We've got iPads now. We've got emails. It's ridiculous. But they can't do it. The only way they're going to do this is to actually scrap it all, which obviously they can't do because there's patients always in the system, and start again. We've already wasted 12 billion. I guarantee that this will be another 3.5 billion down the toilet.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought.
Maybe it'll be as good as Matt Hancock's app.
Oh, yeah, the NHS app. Do people still have that?
No, apparently that thing's coming back. They love that thing. They want a bit of that.
37 billion on track and trace.
I love the fact they say to you, you can go on the NHS app to book your GP appointments. Well, you can, but you can't get a GP appointment however you use it, whatever platform you're after.
Yeah, you can go onto the NHS app, or better still, you can not go onto the NHS app.
You can just die.
It was always useless, so...